Here at Coach Parry, we've got an amazing community, and we asked them what do they wish they knew when they started running. And we put together a great video because we got so many cool suggestions. If there's anything you wish you knew when you started running, please pop that in the comments below. So the first comment we got was from Mike Smith, and he said the magic happens when you sleep. So the reason why the magic happens when you sleep is that is the time where our body is working the hardest at regenerating. And essentially it happens when we sleep because we were designed through evolution to be diurnal. That means that we're designed to sleep when it's dark and be awake when it's daylight. And our hormonal responses are triggered by the changing of the light. And certain processes need to take place at certain times for us to get that full or to get the best adaptation or recovery while we are sleeping. And the most important thing I can give you around that is to tell you that when you get into bed is probably the most important of all of those things. Because if you get into bed after 10 o'clock at night, what happens is that there is a dampening of the hormonal control. There's a reduction in the peak release of hormones while we are sleeping, with particular respect to growth hormone and testosterone. And those two are very important in terms of the recovery process. So remember to always try and get into bed that little bit earlier. If you want to learn more about how to sleep better at night, then watch the video on screen.
So as Julie mentioned, one of the things she wished she knew before running was getting fitted in the right running shoes. Now this is quite an important factor considering you are running in those are connected to your feet and you're spending hours in those running shoes. Now a key thing to look out for is we want to make sure that they're fitted right for you. It is going to be a personal preference. There's no one brand is better than the other. It really comes down to what works best for you. So in an ideal world, you want to try and test different models or different shoes. See what fits right, see what's recommended. So I would strongly advise trying to get to a specialist retail store where they can really talk you through different shoes rather than just trying to put you in the first or most expensive pair of shoes that they might have on the shelves. Some of the things we want to look out for is the actual fit. So you want to make sure that there is a little bit of space in front of the big toe. We definitely don't want you losing any toenails, especially on those longer runs. So you want a little bit of space in front of the big toe. You also don't want your foot to be the shoe to be too tight and restricting around the bridge or the top of your shoe. In saying that, I also don't want you to be looking for a pair of shoes where there is a lot of friction and a lot of movement with your foot in the shoe, as then we start talking blisters and other problems that might come into play as well. So the fit is important. In terms of the right kind of shoe, when we're talking pronation, anti-pronation shoes, a lot of running stores might actually recommend they'll get you to walk up and down, they'll have a look at your feet and how you walk, and the first thing they want to do is put you into anti-pronation running shoes. I can tell you that for 90% of the people, maybe even more, you can actually get away with a neutral shoe. It is only in real extreme cases that we would recommend you getting into an anti-pronation shoe. A neutral shoe works for most of the population, unless, as I mentioned, you have a really serious or severe problem. So the right format of shoe, and then I would strongly recommend, and it's not always ease of access, if you'd like to put it that way, but going to get a proper gait analysis done. So there are institutions, some running stores or specialist running stores do offer gait analysis where they watch you run in shoes, watch you running barefoot, can get an idea of your running style, your running gait, and then according to that, recommend the right kind of shoes. Also by looking at the wear patterns on your shoes as to which ones are going to be more important. The sooner you can get that sorted out, the better.
So Tony Lloyd says that following a structured training program would give him the results that he wanted rather than just winging it. Tony is spot on. Following a structured training program is really the key to doing things in the right sort of way. And the reason is this, is that when you have a structured training program, it's been scientifically thought out and built up progressively. It takes into account the right amount of rest you need. It takes into account the right intensities and what you're really going for in your training program. And so that's why it's really, really key to be following that. If we're not following a structured plan, and kind of winging it, as Tony says, we land up doing the things that we like to do and not the things that we don't like to do. And you're probably not resting enough when you need to, because we're always trying to think that more is better. And so part of the dangers of doing that is that essentially you're putting yourself at a higher injury risk, you're putting yourself at a risk for perhaps not recovering enough, or the alternate, perhaps you're going to be not training the right amount in order to elicit the results that you're actually looking for. So if you do need some help with a structured training program, then click on the link that's on screen now.
The next one's from Peter Sheridan, and he wishes he knew that recovery became more and more important as we get older. And this is key for everybody, in that the magic literally happens when we recover, not while we are exercising. And that is a misconception that most people don't understand. They think they're getting fitter and faster while they are doing the exercise. But the reality is that it's the body repairing, fixing and improving during recovery that allows us to get fitter, stronger and faster. And as we get older, that becomes more and more important, because we are consistently losing strength as we get older. And so the net effect of that is that when we do our workouts, we are working harder than we used to work. If we're working harder, we're doing more damage. And that means we need more recovery afterwards. The recovery becomes more important. And if you allow yourself to recover properly, your body will reward you. If you want to learn more about how to recover better, watch the video on screen.
Awesome. Thank you, Lindsay. Janet said that not every run has to be as hard as a race. Some runners, if not most of them, think that after every session you need to be half dead in order for it to be an effective session. Unfortunately, it's not the case. Only 20% of your overall volume of training needs to be done hard. And when we constantly run hard, unfortunately, we're susceptible to things like overtraining, injury, not recovering fast enough after sessions, and it also does hamper our long-term effectiveness of our sessions.
So the next tip came through from Cecile van Niekerk, and it says Vaseline is not optional. And I know that's funny, but it is so true. And as a bigger runner myself, I speak from first-hand experience about how uncomfortable it can be during a run if you are chafing. So absolutely, lubrication is a must. Some people don't chafe and they're lucky, but the longer you go, chances are at some stage in your running career, you are going to chafe. When we talk lubrication, there's obviously lots of different products. Vaseline is one of them, Body Glide's another. You got to find what works for you, and make sure that when you do lubricate, you lubricate up in all places where you may chafe. Things like between your thighs, under your armpits. If you're wearing a heart rate strap, sometimes that causes some chafe, or if you're wearing a sports bra, you could use some lubrication there too. One thing that I found out is that I tend to chafe in places where some people don't even have places. So a lot of this is trial and error, but as you go longer, you'll figure out where you do chafe. Another area where I struggle personally is chafed nipples. What I tend to use is plasters for that sort of chafe and preventing that chafe. Just make sure you, again, find a product that works for you, that sticks well onto your skin, and you may need to try one or two different products, but when you are applying it, make sure it sticks properly. There are no loose corners or edges sticking up, because that tends to hook on your running shirt as well and can pull it off and cause some more chafing issues. So let's head over to Shona now for the next tip.
So Trisha Walker's saying that some days are harder than others. Just because you can run 5Ks non-stop one day doesn't mean you can the next time. Hormones and your mindset can be so different on a daily basis. Trisha's spot on, and the reason for that is that there are days where you're not feeling great, or there are days where you feel like you can run forever, and that's down to life and stress. You know, we are really good at quantifying exercise and how much that load that puts on the body, but we're not amazing at really focusing on how much stress takes away from our training and how much lack of sleep takes away from that. Lindsay's dived into a little bit on that inner sleep aspect, but when we are very stressed, when things are very stressful at work, when there's things going on in different relationships, or you're not getting enough sleep, that is going to affect your ability to train. And so it's really important that you take that into account and that you train accordingly. And so going out just hard and pushing it is not going to make that session any better, and not going to make your gain or benefit from that session any better. In actual fact, it's going to do the opposite. And the body still sees that as a stress and reacts to it as such. And so it's really, really important that you do manage those daily stresses and your life stresses within your training program. And you can do that in a number of ways. It's one of the reasons why we prescribe in our running plans to time and not distance, so that you're still getting the time that you need to, but without overextending your physiology when you are particularly stressed. All right, and let's talk hormones specifically. All right, so as a younger female, your hormonal and your menstrual cycle is going to play a part in your training cycle. It's not true for all females. It's not just a blanket approach, but many females do struggle on different sort of phases within their cycle and how they train accordingly, or how that affects their training specifically. And so you can start working around your menstrual cycle to get the best benefits for different types of sessions and when. As an example, if you're starting your period or your menstrual cycle and you're very heavy and very lethargic and lots of different sort of PMS symptoms, you can then start to play around and rather do easier sessions, easier runs at that time. And then there's specific times where you should be doing your strength training later on in the cycle, and you can figure out what works for you and what doesn't in those sorts of cycles. As we get older and go more towards peri and post menopause, of course your hormones are playing a massive role in that, and menopausal symptoms are going to really affect your running. In particular, night sweats and insomnia. You're going to not be getting the rest that you need to then really go out and tackle that session hard. So again, you have to adapt and move your training around just to make sure that you're almost combating these menopausal symptoms specifically.
So Diana mentions, she talks about strength training, and she wishes she knew the value of strength training before she started her running. Now, this is an absolutely imperative component to your training. We bang on about strength training over and over again. We are huge advocates for it. The reason being is, if you think about a run, whether it's a 5K run or a comrades marathon, ultra marathon distance run, the amount of steps that you are taking puts what we call an eccentric load on your muscles. Now, that eccentric load really, it puts a lot of strain on the muscle contraction, and there are a lot of little micro tears that happen in that. Now, the reason for strength and why we punt the strength so much is we're trying to condition your body to be able to handle that training load, the amount of steps that you're taking, keeping the right form, the right running posture, keeping yourself upright during a run. You might have noticed, if you haven't done strength training before, you get to a run, the minute you start to fatigue, you start to find yourself slouching a little bit. It is being able to keep the core nice and strong, keep your glutes, key areas really strong. That helps with that posture and gets you through those runs as well. The big thing with the strength is to make sure that obviously the technique is always sound. I would generally advise trying to get a professional to help you with that, making sure that you've got the right technique, the right kind of exercises, as well as the right loads. It's also very important that we are doing the right work and the right workload that complements the running, rather than going to try and do one thing and they start to work against each other. So again, really just driving the point home, strength training is going to be a huge component of your running training. If you are new to strength, if you've never done strength training before and are interested, we have put together a free training plan or a free strength training plan. Feel free to click on the link and go and check that out.
The thing that Lucy said she wished she knew when she started running was that no one was actually watching you, even if you think they are, so there is no need to feel self-conscious. Lucy, that's such an amazing point, because there's so many of us that feel so self-conscious when we do start running. We might be carrying a few extra pounds, we might not have the flashiest sporting wear, but there's no reason to feel the way you do. We all need to start somewhere, and the running community is super welcoming and embracing. The most important thing that you need to keep in mind is that you're actually getting out there and doing something.
Jennifer's saying she wished she knew what a positive impact running would have on her mental health. As someone who struggles with depression, I found that as well. It's a massive help towards just mental health and mental well-being. And the reason for that, I mean, you guys would have heard the term runner's high, which comes through a lot in sort of colloquial kind of magazines and so on. And it's a real thing. It's a real scientific thing. When we exercise, there's a release of endorphins, which is essentially a bit of a happy drug. And so it makes you feel better. It makes you feel like you're accomplishing something as well. Latest research has actually come out to show that there's a metabolite or hormone that gets released that actually has the same impact as when people are smoking marijuana. It gets across the blood-brain barrier and allows for an increase in dopamine levels, which is really that running is like a drug, essentially. So that concept of running improves your mental health is scientifically based, and it really is one of the aspects that will help you look after your mental health and your mental well-being in a really, really good way.
So another tip you wish you knew before you started running came through from Graham Stevens, and he says 1 sheet is enough. I'm not quite sure what that means, but I'll take his word for it.